Okay, now, as we mentioned, we're very pleased to have joining us a good friend from covering Army football, one of the most respected writers of any type in the country today, who focuses on sports, and is John Feinstein. John, how are you today?
I'm good, Ken. Happy holidays to you.
Happy holidays to you. Thank you for taking a couple of minutes. I know you just got off a network assignment a few minutes ago, but lots going on today. Black Monday, I guess, for the NFL coaches. And what interests us and concerns us a little bit is Harbaugh going to University of Michigan for what I guess the last I read was $49 million to coach the football team there.
Yep, that's the money, the dollars that have been thrown out there, and Michigan obviously has all the money in the world, as do most of the schools, particularly the big name ones in the Big Five conferences, and they're fairly desperate because their last two coaches have been failures outside of Brady Hoke's first year when they won 11 games and went to the Sugar Bowl, but the last 9 seasons now have been close to a washout, so they're willing to pay almost anything to get Jim Harbaugh to come in, ride in on his white horse, and rescue the football program.
Maybe offer some thoughts on the bowl season. We had a terrific bowl game here in New York Saturday night, which Penn State won 31-30 over Boston College. That was a pretty exciting night of college football in New York City.
Yeah, it was dramatic. There's no question about it. I got to be honest with you, Ken. I'm still not a big fan of football games being played in Yankee Stadium. Maybe it's because they put the media in the baseball press boxes. It's a terrible seat. But they had a sellout crowd. Penn State was obviously a good draw. BC usually travels fairly well, and it was certainly a great game. I thought Penn State was dead when they were down 21-7, and they managed to tie the game just before the buzzer in the fourth quarter, and then, of course, the mixed extra point was the difference in the overtime. But of the bowl games played thus far, and it seems like there have been about 100 of them, they all blur together, don't they? That was probably as dramatic as any we've seen.
John, I was curious, the new 4-team playoff to see who will be a national champion. Something you're in favor of?
Well, it's a step in the right direction. Having 4 teams be able to compete for the national title is better than 2. I wasn't really thrilled with the process. Why are you revealing, quote unquote, every week where people stand when clearly it has no meaning when TCU can be ranked 3rd the week before the final standings, the only ones that matter, come out and win 55-3 and drop to 6. So what exactly is the point then of doing weekly rankings other than for marketing purposes? I've said for, 20 years now that there should be a 12-team playoff, that you make the regular season meaningful by having the first 4 teams get byes, the next 4 teams play their first-round games at home, get rid of the conference championship games, play first-round games that weekend, and then the last 4, of course, are scrambling to get in. That gives teams like Boise State of the past, TCU of the past, Utah of the past, teams that aren't from the Power Conference, a chance to legitimately compete for a national championship, and if they're good enough to play with the big boys, as those schools have proven in the past that they can, then they can win in advance. I think that would be great for college football, and it would mean far less missed class time for the players involved, even the 2 teams that make it to the championship game, than is involved in the college basketball tournament. And I'm very tired of hearing the presidents talk about quote-unquote student athletes missing class time, because we know college football, big-time college football, is only about the money.
And, of course, December used to be a time where the athletes got a chance to study for their end-of-semester exams, but now there are more and more bowl games. John, I know we got a break. I hope you can stay with us after we have to take a break in a couple of minutes. But wanted you to talk a little bit about the impact of the Big Five conferences. This was kind of the first year where we saw the new world, kind of firmly established. But what we see also is it's draining money out of the other conferences in Division I. And we saw Alabama, Birmingham already drop their program because they said they couldn't afford to invest what they said was going to be $8 million a year more to stay competitive.
Yeah. Do you want to talk about it now or after the break, Ken? Because it's a long answer.
Well, what's your first thought on that?
My first thought is you're right, and just remember that the Big Five conferences now, it used to be 6, now it's 5 with the Big East gone, don't care about anybody else in college football. In fact, the University of Alabama at Tuscaloosa was directly involved in the UAB program.
John, you're going to have to hold the thought right there. You're listening to the Sons of the American Legion radio report here on WVOX, 1460 AM and heard worldwide at WVOX.com. We'll be back after a brief Fox News break with more conversation with nationally recognized sports writer and broadcaster John Feinstein, so stay tuned.
Welcome back to the Sons of the American Legion radio report on WVOX AM 1460 and heard around the world on WVOX.com. Joining us on the line is author John Feinstein. And now, here's Ken.
Hey, thanks, Jack. Good afternoon again, and very pleased to have John Feinstein with us today, a good friend of ours from covering Army football. And, John, maybe we'd start by just having you mention a couple of your current publications. I know you've got a book out on minor league baseball and also some children's books. Maybe you'd want to mention those.
Yeah, well, thanks for asking, Ken. I appreciate it. Where Nobody Knows Your Name is the book I wrote that came out earlier this year on life in AAA baseball. It's a lot like the book I did on PGA Tour qualifying school a few years ago, and then it follows a group of guys who are very, very successful in their sport, right near the top, but haven't been able to quite crack with any consistency that absolute elite level where you're playing in the major leagues for 10 or 12 years and becoming very rich. The difference between a top-level AAA player and a major league player financially is huge. The major league minimum is $500,000 a year. There aren't minimum. There are very few guys in AAA making even $100,000 a year, and there'll be some very familiar names in the book if you were to read it, because a lot of the guys I talk to are guys who have had success at the major league level, but for one reason or another had slid back to AAA when I was researching the book. The other book that you mentioned is called The Walk-On. It's actually the 8th kids mystery that I've written, dating back to when I wrote Last Shot, which was set at the Final Four about 9 years ago. And The Walk-On is the story of a kid named Alex Myers, who's a high school freshman football player who, like a lot of 14-year-olds, is dealing with his parents going through a divorce, being in a new school, trying to prove himself on a new team with a new coach. The coach is a bully. His son, the coach's son, is the starting quarterback, which makes Alex's life a lot more complicated. And there are a lot of twists and turns to the story, and it's the first of a trilogy that will follow this kid through both football, basketball, and baseball, because I'm a big believer that we need to get back to having kids play sports, plural, rather than work at one sport, singular, which is what has been, unfortunately, the trend in recent years.
And what's the name of your book, your children's book about the rivalry at the Army-Navy game?
That's called The Rivalry, cleverly enough, and it was part of the series of 6 books I did that was based on 2 teenage aspiring young sports writers, a boy and a girl, both very talented, who, for various reasons, get to go to big events, and they get to go to the Army-Navy game and, of course, get entangled in a mystery during the playing of the game.
No, it's a great book, and I do want to mention many of your titles are at a local bookstore who we like to support, Anderson's in Larchmont. Jen, I know, is a big fan of the manager there, is a big fan of carrying many of your amazing titles, starting with A Season on the Brink, and so many others that you have written. I've got on my desk here The Majors and Hardcourts about the tennis tour and all your days covering Wimbledon.
Well, I appreciate that, especially Anderson's and other independent bookstores are so important nowadays with the way publishing and reading have changed in the last 15 or 20 years. So I'm glad that you're supporting a local independent bookstore because they need and deserve our support. Absolutely.
Now, you were talking a little bit about the impact of the change in college football affects basketball as well, and with the formation of these Big Five conferences, also affects Army football, which we cover here. I know you've been covering for so many years. It's tough for Army to find opponents that they can, you might say, be successful against, or as some say, have a fair fight game. What are some of your thoughts? I know you've been looking closely at the Army football program as they approach their future, trying to find a place that's a good fit for them going forward.
Well, I like the fact that Boo Corrigan has been patient and has not jumped into a conference when everybody's jumping from conference to conference, and Navy is now going to be in the American Athletic Conference next year. I think they're fortunate, actually, that the conference is not as strong as it was when they first agreed to join, when it was still the Big East 5 years ago. I think that's a break for Navy. We saw how it worked out when Army tried to join Conference USA. They thought they would get the more television exposure, that it would help recruiting. Instead, it was one of the reasons the program fell so badly early in the 21st century. The main reasons were Rick Greenspan and Todd Berry, but the being in Conference USA didn't help things out at all. And I think as long as Army can hang on and be an independent and thus have some control over its schedule. I know, that it is harder to schedule as an independent, especially with the conference realignment, but Army's still Army, Ken. People are still going to want to play Army. And I think the ideal schedule for Army is 4 games against teams that'll be tough to beat, 4 games against teams that you should have at least a 50-50 chance, and 4 games where you're the clear-cut favorite. That way, if you're good in a given year, you're going to win 7 or 8 games and get to a bowl game. If you're really good in a given year, you're going to win 9 or 10, the way Navy's been able to do a couple of times as an independent, and you have some protection there at the lower end of the schedule. I know it didn't work out this year with that game at Yale. That was, I can't call it anything but a debacle. You can't lose that game. But when they start to get better and have better football players, I don't think you're going to see games like that happen again in the future.
Okay, now our colleague Jeff Monken has got a question for you.
Yeah, John, how do you assess Army's first season under their new head coach, Jeff Monken?
I give it, Chuck, about a B-, C+. I think there were some absolute positives. I think that the players really, as the cliche goes, bought into what Jeff Monken and his coaches brought to the table. I think they liked their new coaching staff. I'm told by people who are around there all the time that the work ethic on the coaching staff and among the players was great this year, and that's very positive. There were a couple of losses, as I said, the Yale game, the Wake Forest game, that I found inexplicable. I mean, if they win those 2 games, which were eminently winnable games, they're 6-6 and they go to a bowl, and everybody's jumping up and down and excited, even with the loss to Navy, which was a very competitive game. That was good to see. The fact is, though, that the way this new coaching staff is going to be judged is very simple. Can they go out and recruit better football players than Army's recruited in the last 15 years? Because there has been a tangible difference in talent level between Army and Navy and Army and Air Force for a long time now. And that needs to change. And that's Jeff Monken's challenge, to get better football players, to find a quarterback like Keenan Reynolds, who can make plays when you absolutely have to have plays made by a quarterback. And Army has not had that for a long time. Trent Steelman was a very solid guy, but he didn't have the ability to make something from nothing the way a guy like Keenan Reynolds does.
Absolutely, John. I know college basketball is really your first love, and around here we've got a very good team in Iona. They won their 8th game. Tim Cluse's head coach's 100th win yesterday, and they've got a lights-out junior guard named A.J. English and a terrific freshman named Shadrach Casimir. What are your thoughts on college basketball this season?
Well, I mean, specifically to Iona, I think Tim Cluse has had the program pointed in the right direction for the last couple of years, gotten the NCAA a couple of years ago, as you said, has whenever you got a guard who can really score and can really make other guys around him better, that means you've got a chance to have a good team. Tim's a very solid coach. The MAC, I think, is eminently winnable. Iona has, as you know, all sorts of great history going back to Jim Valvano and Jeff Ruland. So there's no reason to believe they won't have a very, very solid season this year. Generally, I think that we've seen some amazing results in the month of December. I mean, New Jersey Tech going in and beating Michigan, Eastern Michigan beating Michigan, Incarnate Word, which I swear to God, Ken, I followed college basketball really closely. I didn't even know they were in Division I until they beat Princeton and Nebraska the way they did. And we've just seen, Texas Southern going in and beating Michigan State. Are you kidding me? So it's been a remarkable December, and it leads me to believe that we're going to have some, as we always seem to, some results that are going to stun us all come March.
Hey, John, we just have about 30 seconds. What's your thoughts on Army basketball? We got Kelsey Minato on the women's team and Kyle Wilson on the men's team. They're both off to great starts on the season.
Yeah, and I hope Kyle Wilson's going to be okay for the start of conference play against Lafayette on Wednesday night. great non-conference season for both teams, but for the Army men to go out and win at USC, that's as good a win as Army has had in basketball in many, many, many years.
John Feinstein, thank you so much for calling in and joining us today here on WVOX, Sons of the American Legion Report. Thank you for all that you do covering the academies, which does so much to cover our military and our veterans.
It's my pleasure, Ken, and I hope you guys have a happy New Year.
Thank you,
Same to you, John. We'll see you soon. Take care.
Thank you.